My name is Patrick. I grew up in Germany and Austria, and my passion and interest for the marine life started when I was a small kid. So I would never sit still at the dentist, but the dentist had an aquarium, and so the dentist started looking at my teeth while I was staring into the aquarium, mesmerized. And then my parents realized that I have a passion for underwater life, and they fueled this passion by getting me an aquarium. And then I was 4 then, so now for 34 years I've been keeping fish at home and breeding fish. But I also as a teenager started to scuba dive in the Caribbean, and after school I became a diving instructor and worked in the Red Sea. Then I studied the behavior of animals at the University of Vienna. And then after graduating, I backpacked through Southeast Asia for a year, and I worked with primates and I worked with fish in research. And I was also working in the education department in the zoo in Vienna. And the curator of the zoo was a guest lecturer for Silversea, and Silversea was looking for staff, and so he introduced me to Silversea, and that was 5 years ago. And so for 5 years I've been fortunate enough to travel around the planet with Silversea.
John, would you introduce yourself and talk to us a bit about how you got into this job?
Sure. So my name is John. I'm from Canada. I'm 30 years old, so I've been doing this for about a year. Some prior jobs I've had are working as a biologist, as a firefighter, soil scientist, so I'm very much into the natural world. I got into this job by sending a few emails. For some reason they decided to interview me. They asked how I got out of an unusual situation once, and I described how to bribe an African police officer. So this is how I got hired on. They thought, oh wow, this guy knows how to handle himself. And so I've been doing this for about a year, and Antarctica is one of my favorite places. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. Kirsty, would you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how you got into the job?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kirsty. I'm from South Africa, and I was very lucky. When I was growing up, I would either be in a game reserve or living close to a game reserve, and both my mum and dad loved animals and they loved conservation. So the whole time while I was growing up, I was always involved with looking after animals and being involved in nature reserves and game reserves and spending lots of time in them. So I developed a massive passion for conservation and animals from when I was tiny, from when I was a baby. And that just stuck by me for the rest of my life. When I was 16, I went to go and work at the Ocean Research Institute for my holidays, and there I developed a huge passion for dolphins and whales. And from then I went on to go and study different animals at university. I did studies on elephants and African wild dogs and lions and leopards, as well as lots of different dolphins and whale species. And then from there I got a job working in Mauritius on dolphins and whales. I got to spend lots of time in the water with them, lots of time studying them because they're such awesome animals. And then I went on to carry on and work down in Antarctica on Antarctic blue whales, which was very, very cool. They're such awesome animals to work with. And then how I got involved with Silversea was by chance. I was having a barbecue, or what South Africans call a braai, and another man was there from Silversea, and we started talking about Antarctica, and he said that the company was looking to hire people and I should just send my CV in, and so I did, and I ended up working for Silversea, and I've been here for about 2.5 years now.
Wow, thank you. You can try and make up some answers that sound real if you don't know something.
No,
My
you
answers
can
are
never
all
do
real.
that.
If I don't know the answer, I will tell you.
My friend Jack asked, how much snow fell in Antarctica this year, and is it different from other years?
Well, I think I'll jump in on that.
Yes, why not?
Antarctica is both the highest, the driest, and the coldest continent. Now, in the very center of Antarctica, more or less at the South Pole, there's very little snow actually falling. You get a little bit on the coast, but because there's no water source for clouds to form in the center of Antarctica, very little snow falls. It's actually a desert in the center of Antarctica. It's a lot wetter, more snowier on the coast, but still, it's an extremely dry area, and it doesn't snow more than, maybe a foot, 2 feet, depending where you are in Antarctica every year. And that's the high regions in the coast. The middle, very small amount of snow. So we can't know exactly for sure because we don't have weather stations everywhere. But driest in the middle, most snow on the coast.
Okay, thank you. He also asks, how large or tall can an iceberg be?
The tallest iceberg ever recorded was 55 stories high. Can you imagine a 55-story building? And this is only above the water. And so you've heard the saying, only 10% of the iceberg is above the water. So imagine you have your massive 55-story building, or iceberg, and this is about 200 miles long by 25 miles wide, give or take, an absolutely enormous iceberg. And then imagine your 55 stories and then 90% of that below.
Wow.
So if you have a drink with an ice cube inside, how much of the ice cube is sticks out of the drink?
The very top.
Yeah, like how much do you see of it? Is most of
All
it
of it.
above the water or underneath?
Underneath, but you see all of it still.
Yeah, because you look through the glass, right? But so the ice cube is nothing else than a tiny, tiny iceberg. So if you look at the ice cube, they only see the little top sticking out, and the rest is underwater. And that's the same with this iceberg that John just explained.
Is that the same one that's as big as Connecticut?
No, Connecticut is actually quite small for these icebergs. So this iceberg I was talking about was found by a U.S. Navy ship in 1955. It was bigger than the country of Belgium,
Wow.
and you could fit several Connecticut's inside Belgium.
My friend Sydney asks, what is the coldest temperature it has been in Antarctica?
I'll jump in again right here. So the coldest temperature in Antarctica and on Earth was at Lake Vostok Station, which is an inland Russian research station in Antarctica. It was minus 88 Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, so you're going to have to translate that and maybe dub it in. But minus 88.1 Celsius, I believe, is the absolute lowest temperature we've had on Earth.
Wow. She also asked, has the temperature been changing, and if so, how many degrees?
Yes, the temperature has been changing. It is much like everywhere else in the world, it's getting warmer. In terms of actual numerical changes of degrees, we're not entirely sure, but the ice sheets are decreasing in mass, meaning the temperature is above freezing most of the year. So we know that the temperature is warmer than it has been in the past. In terms of actual numbers, you'll have to ask Dr. Google.
My friend Sam asks, does it snow year-round, or does it snow more at times than others?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in there again.
You
It
kind of answered it before, no?
Yeah, I mean, it can snow year-round, but
Yeah.
the temperature has to be below freezing. So if it starts precipitating, raining or snowing in summer, and it's 34 degrees or something like this, it falls as rain, but it has to be below 32 to be snow. So, could be year-round, but more likely winter.
My friend Amelia asks, why do penguins do better in ice and snow?
Shall I jump
If you
in
want
here?
to, yeah.
Yes.
So penguins do better in these cold areas because the water around Antarctica has got lots and lots of nutrients in it. So it's got lots of nice things to eat, and because of all those nice nutrients, there are lots of plants that grow, and because there are all these tiny little phytoplankton that grow in these cold waters, there's lots of krill, and penguins love krill and fish. So they'll do really well in these icy, snowy, colder conditions because there's so much for them to eat around here because of that awesome, cold, nutrient-rich water that we see around Antarctica.
Cool. And I can add something to that. So, what kind of jackets were you wearing when you were in Antarctica just now?
Parkas.
Were they like really thick and warm?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what happens if you wear this parka when you go on a holiday to the Caribbean and you wear this parka?
You get too hot.
And what happens then?
You start to sweat.
You start to sweat, and if you can't even sweat,
Like birds.
you might just break down. And the penguins, they can't take off their parka. They have really thick feathers. And if you take them up to the equator, then they're just getting too hot. And that's why they don't do well in heat at all. That's why they're always down in the cold areas as well. They're different. That's a very good question, because if you look at the penguins in Galapagos, you see that they have skin in their eyes and in their face, right? Do you remember that? So they're like bare parts of skin in the face. And if you do sports, what color does your face become?
Red.
Red. Why does it become red?
Because you're hot.
Because it's hot, so there's more blood flowing through your skin, and you can get heat off your skin, right? If you put cold water in your face, it will cool you down right away, because the blood comes from your body, runs through your face, it gives the heat away, and takes the coldness from the cold water in, and then goes back into your body. And the penguins in Galapagos, they also have parts in their face without feathers, and so they can do the same as you can do when you're getting too hot. So they increase the blood flowing through their face, and they can get rid of the heat. So if you put a penguin from Galapagos down to Antarctica, it'll be too cold for it. Yeah.
Thank you. Amelia also asks, is there more ice or snow each year?
Well, is there more ice or snow each year? There's a small percentage more sea ice each year. Very small, maybe 1% more, but a significant decrease in continental ice. Next.
So the whole continent is covered in ice. You hardly see anything of the soil itself. It's just like, I think the South Pole has like 300 meters of ice on top or something.
3,000.
Oh, 3,000. Okay.
So at the most, Antarctica has 4,000 meters of ice over the rock to sea level. That's 13,000 feet, give or take.
Yeah. So there's a mountain of ice on top of the continent. You don't even see the soil. And all this ice mountain on top of the continent, just that becomes smaller, that becomes less. Do you have an idea where this water goes to?
The ocean?
The ocean, yeah. And what happens if all that ice that melts goes to the ocean, or more of it goes to the ocean?
You get too much water?
Yeah, and what happens then?
Flood?
A flood, yeah. What happens, so let's say you have a house on the seaside.
In Florida.
In Florida, yeah. Do you live in Florida? Oh, okay, a perfect
That'll
example.
turn that water cold?
Yeah, so if you go to Miami Beach, for example, or something, you see that the houses, they are very close to the water actually. So when you want to walk into the sea, you basically walk straight. And let's imagine the water goes up just 1 meter, and all this coastline disappears, and the houses that are close to the ocean will disappear as well. And that's a big problem that we have around the world, everywhere.
Because of global warming?
Because of the changing climate, yeah, there's all the ice is melting and the water is filling up the ocean. It's like if you have a sink that you fill up with water and you add water to it, at some point it's going to flow over. And that's it's kind of happening as well with us.
Thank you. My friend William asks, which penguin is the most abundant and how many species are there?
Do you want to take this one?
Most abundant. I'm not sure. The Adelis were doing very well.
The
They
Adelis,
found
yeah.
a big new breeding ground for the Adelie penguins, so they were doing very well. As far as I know, the genter populations are increasing
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, the gentoos, I think they're the most abundant in the Antarctic Peninsula, what we visited now. And have you seen the Adelie penguin too?
No, not
Yeah, so they have a wide ring around the eye. There were only a few on this voyage, but further south there's lots of them. They are the most abundant. And there are in Antarctica about 7 species, but there's I think up to 20 around the whole southern part of the planet.
So some of the penguin species like using the Antarctic Peninsula, so that's why we saw so many gentoos and so many chin straps on this trip, because they need those little rocks to build their nest, they need some ground to build their nest on. Whereas other penguin species, like the emperor penguin, they'll just rest their nest on their legs, so they don't need those rocks and patches of bare ground like we saw on the peninsula. So they'll be further on further south in Antarctica because they can utilize different areas because they don't need bare ground to lay their eggs on. They just rest their eggs on their little feet and tuck next to their body. So that's why we're seeing different penguin species in different areas of Antarctica.
My friend Ellie asks, do you place trackers on penguins or other animals?
Okay. So they have placed trackers on penguins before. The problem down in Antarctica is those, because it's so cold, the batteries on the trackers really struggle with the cold. So the battery will run out really quickly in Antarctica by placing a tracker on a penguin. So although they do place trackers on them, they're not very effective down here in Antarctica. In other places in the southern hemisphere, where it's a little bit warmer, then they can place trackers on the penguins, and those batteries will last for a little bit longer, so they'll be able to collect more data over a few weeks rather than just a few days here.
Ellie also asks, what is the penguin's greatest predator?
So that varies depending on whether they're on land or in the ocean. So when they're on land, the greatest predator to the penguins, to their eggs and their chicks, will be a bird called a skua. And you guys, I think you saw some of the skuas while you're down here. So they'll come in and they'll raid the penguin's nest, and they'll grab either the egg or the chick from the penguin, and they'll be their greatest predator on land. And the kelp gulls also come in and steal some of the eggs and chicks. When they're in the water, however, the greatest predators are the leopard seals, which we saw some of those too, very cool seals, very big seals, and also the killer whales. So we'll have killer whales or orcas down here in Antarctica that will go hunting the penguins when they're in the water.
My friend Brian asks, what is the weirdest animal you have seen?
In the world or in Antarctica?
Both. In the world.
In the world.
Axolotls are pretty weird.
Axolotls, they're pretty cool, yeah.
What are they?
They're freaks. Do you want to describe axolotls? You know better than I, perhaps.
Yeah, I can. You just have to think about the English word. The axolotl is it's a salamander. So all salamanders, when they are hatching from their eggs, they live in water first, and then they come out of the water and live on land. But the axolotl never comes out of the water; it always stays in the water, and it has the gills hanging out of the side of the head, and they regrow their legs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you chop a leg off, it'll regrow.
How fast does it regrow?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. Do you?
Dr. Google will have to answer that.
Probably one of the strangest animals we see down in Antarctica, though, is a thing called a sulp. And I'm not sure if we saw any this trip. So they look like a clear piece of jelly, almost.
Oh yeah, we saw one.
Did you see some?
They're in like a leaf shape and they've got this little red berry.
Yes, yeah.
That's
So
what
they
they are.
come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Some of them look like cucumbers. Some of them are tiny little things. Some of them look squished. Some
We
of
only
them
saw
are.
dead ones though.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Only the dead ones. But they're very strange animals that we find here. Yes.
How do they move? Can they swim or do they just?
They mostly just move from the currents that are taking them around the ocean.
What kind of stuff do they eat?
They filter feeders, so they'll just filter water through their bodies and then take up little bits of phytoplankton or zooplankton from the water. So the tiny little animals and plants from the water.
So I think the the coolest and weirdest animal, or one of the many, is for me the octopus. Have you seen an octopus in an aquarium before? Do you know what they are or what they do? Yeah, so they have 8 arms, and they can change their color, they can change their shape, they can squeeze through little holes, little cracks.
They can
Yeah.
also open jars.
They
from
can
the
open
inside.
jars. Exactly, they're
From the
extremely.
inside.
Sorry?
From the inside.
Yeah, imagine that. That's so cool. They have all these sucker cups. They're very clever, as you said, intelligent. They can use tasks or solve tasks. They remember things. They recognize people. And they can change the texture of their skin. And so I think that's why I think they're pretty incredible. What is the weirdest animal that have you seen?
On this trip, It's my favorite too. The Dick Dick.
The Dick Dick? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they're really
very cute.
Yeah. They have these little horns
And the
yeah.
big eyes.
Their nose is always twitching too.
Yeah.
What about echidnas?
Cute.
Yeah. I like the feather-tailed gliders. They're like these mouse-ish things, and
Yeah.
they have like almost like wings, kind of.
Yeah. They can
but they're fly attached from to their tree arms. to tree.
Yeah, they're home in Australia, right? Yeah. Yeah, they're really cool as well. Tiny. Yeah, they're nice.
Yeah, we got to hold them, and they would crawl up on.
And I would also like to know from you what your favorite thing was on this voyage.
Well, that was dinner with me, right?
After dinner with John.
I like seeing the whales and the leopard seal.
Yeah, and why?
They were just cool to see. I like seeing the whales' tails, and I just like seeing the leopard seal.
Yeah.
I like the orcas and the leopard seal.
The orcas, yeah, they were pretty cool. Do you remember how many we saw of those?
6.
6? Yeah, at least. Yeah, they were all over the place. That was beautiful. Yeah, you see big ones and small ones. Did you see one that had a funny dorsal fin that was a bit bent, maybe?
I don't think we saw that one.
Yeah, there was one male around, so the male have a long dorsal fin and it's bent, so it's easy to identify, and we see this one often in this area. It's always the same one with the family or with the pod. Yeah.
My friend Elizabeth asks, what changes have occurred in Antarctica recently?
But small increase in sea ice and a decrease in ice mass on the continent. The species are also moving south into colder waters. So there used to be more Adelie penguins on the peninsula, but now they've gone south to colder waters, and their habitat's being recolonized by gentoos, if I am correct in thinking. Yeah, so global forest fires are also affecting Antarctica, with when the ash from fires in Alaska and Australia and the Amazon gets in the air, eventually it comes down and comes in the poles, which makes the ice darker, meaning it collects more heat. Just like wearing a black shirt outside on a sunny day, it'll be much hotter than wearing a white shirt. So we're putting a black shirt on Antarctica until it snows over again, so it collects more heat. Lots of changes every year.
My friend Harry asks, how cold is the coldest day there?
Well, the temperature I quoted before, minus 88.1 Celsius, that's a world record ever. So, your average winter day, maybe minus 30, minus 40,
minus 50.
minus 50, something like this. And
And
summertime, maybe on the coast, maybe like 2 degrees or minus 1, something like that.
And that's the coldest temperature without the wind blowing. So when the wind blows, then it gets even colder.
My friend Jonah asks, what type of sharks live in the Weddell Sea?
We don't really know.
There might be some that live down in the deep, deep water in the Weddell Sea, but it's really hard to do research in Antarctica to discover these things. So we're not sure.
And my friend Sydney asks, how many layers do you wear to keep warm?
I think that all varies from each of us.
3.
You only wear 3?
Yeah.
You're a brave girl.
No, I wear my long underwear, and then a regular layer on top of it, and then my vest, and my waterproof pants and parka, and my gloves and hats and everything. Well, for the top half, I only wear 4 layers. My long johns, my shirt,
Well, it depends what you're doing, too.
my and the blue parka and the red parka. Yeah. And then my gloves, so that's 5 layers. And my hat, 6.
I wear 5 layers on my top half and 4 layers on my bottom half. But in South Africa, it doesn't get very cold, so when you come down to Antarctica, it's a completely big change in temperature for me.
I wear 2 pairs of merino socks. Merino wool is really warm, and 2 pairs of merino long johns, long underwear, and then my hiking pants on top. And on the top layer I wear one long sleeved shirt, then 2 fleece, and my jacket. And what's really important for me is the neck fleece, because it keeps me warm. And then I always have something spare in my backpack, so I always start off with less, and then when I feel that I'm getting cold, then I just add an extra layer, so I have something to look forward to when I'm cold. I can always do one more. And then what I also like to do is I do push-ups in between when I'm getting cold, because that warms up my body again. Or I take a shovel and I shovel snow. That also warms me up. Yeah. But then it depends on...
Are you good at push-ups?
Well, you don't need to be
You
good
see
at...
his arms?
You don't need to be good at push-ups. Actually, it's an advantage if you're not good at it, and let's say you can only do 4, then after 4 you're already super exhausted and hot. Whereas if you would have to do 500, it takes ages.
Yeah, it's me right here.
So yeah, just enough that get you sweating. That's perfect. Yeah.
Just before you sweat. Yeah, similar for me. A few sweaters, base layer, toques, 'cause 60% of the heat is lost from here up.
We noticed both of you brave it without gloves.
If you keep your core warm enough, you can work without gloves. For most of me, when I was that day without gloves, most of me was sweating, except for my hands. So it kept my hands warm. If you keep your core warm, that blood pushes out to the extremities and keeps your fingers and toes toasty.
And when I have to work in the water, like catching zodiacs, then I wear neoprene gloves, same as you wear for diving in cold water or surfing. And when I feel that the fingers are getting cold, just for 5 minutes, move every finger for 5 minutes, and then the hand warms up again. That's really good. So whenever you're getting...
fingers for 5 entire minutes?
Yeah, just like that, until they're warm.
That's a long time to just move your fingers.
At least they're warm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how we can slow global warming?
I could talk to you a lot about how we can slow global warming. It's an absolutely massive topic. We can drive less, we can fly less, any motor that emits carbon dioxide, reduce the use of. You can buy more local food, so stuff that's grown in your state or in your neighborhood, because if you buy, say you're living in Florida and you buy some apples from New Zealand, they had to come all the way on a ship to Los Angeles, and then trucks had to carry it across the country. So lots of fuel was expended, emissions created by buying this food from across the world. You can eat less meat, because meat production is it's a huge carbon emission. So cows, you've probably heard cows fart perhaps sometimes in your travels. So this is producing methane, and these cows are for human consumption for the most part. So with less demand for meat, meaning if everyone ate less meat, there'd be less cows, there'd be less methane. There's all sorts of things that you can do to reduce your carbon emissions and slow down global warming. We can also, it'd be great if everyone ate less meat, ate more beans, and planted more trees. Because trees turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. But we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
Can you talk to us about how important the whales are to the overall health of our environment?
Yes, so the whales are incredibly important for our environment, especially to the health of our oceans. So because the whales are so big, they're eating lots and lots of things in our oceans. So the majority of the whales are baleen whales, so they've got little baleen plates to filter out what their food is, and they eat krill, so what look like little shrimp-like creatures. And they'll eat all these krill, and because they're eating so much, they're also pooping a lot too. So they'll poop out into the ocean, and that acts like a fertilizer for this little plant we've been talking about, the phytoplankton that we find in our ocean. And that phytoplankton is really, really important, because everything else in the ocean needs that phytoplankton to survive. So that phytoplankton forms the base of our food chain. So it will be the base layer that everything else feeds on in order to survive. So the more the whales poop in the ocean, the more fertilizer there is for the phytoplankton, and the more the phytoplankton can grow. That means that we've got more krill because they're eating the phytoplankton. It means we've got more penguins also really good at taking carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere. So they're taking all that carbon dioxide that's causing a problem with climate change out of our atmosphere and turning that into oxygen. So it's estimated that every fifth breath we take is actually oxygen that's produced by the phytoplankton in the ocean. And that phytoplankton is there partly because of all the whales producing all that fertilizer for them.
Wow.
Pretty cool. Well, I'm sure we could go on for hours about this too, but you've probably heard of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. And there's a reason recycle is last, because something has already entered the chain of production by the time you get to recycle. So reduce, buy less, use less plastic, bring refillable water bottles everywhere. Even paper cups, they're one use, they end up in a landfill. So reduce, and if you do happen to get one of those paper cups, use it 5 times, 10 times. It's perfectly fine to do so before you throw it out. Don't go back to the water fountain with a new cup every single time. And then once you've bought as little as possible and you've reused your containers as much as you can, then you recycle. But recycling is not a golden bullet for our problems. Reducing must come first. So keep that in mind next time you're at the grocery store.
I think you should question everything you're being told by adults. Everything that you're being told, you should ask yourself, except for us. No, seriously, everything that you're being told, you should ask yourself, is that actually right? Does that actually make sense? Or what's the explanation? If you're being told something, you don't really understand it, or it doesn't make sense to you, question it. Ask why. Why do you say I should do that? Why does it make sense? So that's really important, that you don't just blindly follow, but that you decide for yourself what is right. Yeah.
But what you're saying, think about the processes and the end result. Why is this happening, and what will it cause in the future? Don't just think now. Think why? What's going to happen? Look ahead. Look behind. Question.
I think that your guys' generation has a tough task ahead, because you're already a lot more aware about what's happening in the environment than many adults are. Many adults kind of don't know as much as you guys do when it comes to what's happening in the environment. So you guys have a tough challenge ahead, because you're going to have to fix some of the mistakes that our generation has made, unfortunately. And it's not really fair on you guys, but unfortunately, it's just how the world works. So I would say the best way to go ahead and kind of work forward to a better environment is to develop a passion in towards saving the environment, going towards protecting things, preserving things. Like John was saying, trying to reduce your usage as much as possible as a person. While you're brushing your teeth, turn off your tap in between wetting your toothbrush and brushing your teeth. If you're not in a room, turn your lights off. If every human could just do one tiny little bit just to help the environment, then the environment would be in a lot of a better state than it is now. So I think you guys, you've got a cool task ahead where you're going to forge the way forward for us as humans, which is awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
So much. We appreciate you taking your time.
Oh, no problem.
It's a pleasure.